your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Hello, I'm Naveen Day. Thanks for joining us for a look at what made headlines this week. This weekend marks 3 years ago that the Trudeau government invoked the Emergencies Act that shut down the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa and other gatherings across the country. While some say it was the only option the feds had on the table, others thought it was an overreaching response, and it was the day the government declared war on its own people. One of the Freedom Convoy's organizers, Chris Barber, sat down with BCN's Jeanette Roche to reflect on the Freedom Convoy and how it ended.
What was your initial reaction to this when all this started happening?
I remember sitting in one of the hotel rooms with the Honourable Brian Peckford when Justin Trudeau announced the invocation of the Emergencies Act, and what a remarkable place to be for such a huge thing happening in Canada, to be sitting with one of the last living signatures of the Charter of the Canadian Charter of Human Rights, and Brian was just beside himself. He was there were so many different options on the table that we could have used at that time, and Trudeau was hell-bent on using any way to break, the Canadian citizen had the audacity to stand up to his government and his mandates.
Yeah, and many people found it to be, a very heavy-handed move from the federal government. And then I think it was just days later, I think the 18th of February, that the police showed up and armored vehicles and riot gear, and many people called it a peaceful gathering up until then, but after the police came, suddenly there's rubber bullets and flashbangs and tear gas, and we even saw footage circulating with a woman who got knocked down or trampled by a horse or something. I think it was an RCMP officer that was on the horse.
Toronto City Police had their horse brigade there, and the young lady's name is Candace Ciro. She's a Mohawk lady from Ontario who was trampled by one of the police horses.
Wow. And I believe it was your fellow organizer, Tom Marazzo, that said at a press conference that they brought the violence. So how accurate is that statement?
Well, the protest in Ottawa was one of the most peaceful protests in Canadian history. There was no violence. There was no level of violence. The only violence we've seen was from law enforcement acting under Justin Trudeau's, orders to break up the protest and not listen to Canadians who were trying to voice an opinion against the overreach that was happening throughout COVID.
Yeah. What's your opinion about how the government used the emergency powers in this way?
All we ever wanted was a conversation. We had enough people there that showed up on Parliament Hill, and there were so many better ways to do that. You watched Justin Trudeau, basically run as soon as the trucks rolled into Ottawa, as soon as the protesters started questioning him. And he stayed hidden throughout that whole time, and he didn't want to meet with us. And he stated that at the POEC held in November of 2022, sorry. That he wasn't willing to discuss anything with us because he didn't think that we were legitimate, or our concerns didn't need to be addressed by him or his government. So there was always a better way than invoking the Emergencies Act. He could have dealt with it a lot more civilly and peacefully.
Canada's territorial premiers say it is a critical time for the Arctic. They met Thursday with representatives from Greenland in Washington, where Canadian leaders made their diplomatic push against threatened U.S. tariffs. The leaders spoke about prospects for collaboration between Canada and the U.S. on resource development and security. It's becoming increasingly clear from President Donald Trump's repeated comments about the United States somehow absorbing Canada and Greenland that he has an eye on Arctic resources. And this week was the first time in history all 13 premiers were in Washington at the same time. The premiers told business groups and Republican lawmakers that both countries would be hurt in a trade war. Trump has signed executive orders to impose 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports into the United States starting March the 12th. He previously threatened 25% across-the-board tariffs on Canadian and Mexican imports with a lower 10% levy on Canadian energy. That plan has been delayed until at least March the 4th.
I'm so grateful as chair to have such a talented group standing with me right here, and all different perspectives around the country. And every perspective is really concerning their area, but do you know what everyone agrees on? Is protecting Canada as a whole. What success looks like is zero tariffs. We're their largest trading partner. We're their #1 customer. And I'm not too sure if they fully understand the impact on both countries, both sides of the border. Inflation will happen. Interest rates will go up. Plants will be closed on both sides of the border.
Manitoba Premier Wap Kinew says the trip was a success, even though the United States does not appear to have changed its plans to impose tariffs. How serious should Canadians be taking the talks of Canada becoming the 51st state? In this interview with BCN's Jeanette Rocher, political reporter Brian Lilley discussed leaked footage of Justin Trudeau saying Trump is serious.
So I thought we were kind of over this thing, but it looks like there was allegedly audio that came out last week of Justin Trudeau saying that Donald Trump is serious about making Canada the 51st state. So the claim is that it was a hot mic moment that wasn't supposed to be made public. But Brian, you think Trudeau wanted this audio out there. Why do you think that?
Oh, as soon as I heard it on Friday, I said this was leaked on purpose. They didn't cut the mic. So the media was invited into this event in Toronto. It was a bunch of business people. They're calling it the Team Canada event. And they're brainstorming and discussing ways to push back. And the media was allowed in for the first few minutes for Trudeau's opening comments, which sounded a lot like a TED Talk. And then after the media left, well, he started talking and they hadn't cut the mic. I think that he did this on purpose. My podcast this week on Full Comment, I interviewed Joel Pollack from Breitbart just after that news broke. And Joel even thought, yeah, this is probably strategy on Trudeau's part. I mean, it can be political strategy in terms of how he plays it up for the Liberals to try and say, look, nasty Donald Trump's coming for us and we're going to fight against him and we're against him and others aren't. But there's also strategy in terms of how Canada negotiates with the White House over this. So, I think he wanted it out there and I think it served him politically to have it out there.
Interesting. Okay, so you think Trudeau says that, Donald Trump is serious about making Canada the 51st state. So what does Trump, the man himself, have to say about this?
His Fox News interview just ahead of the Super Bowl on Sunday, he was asked about it. Brett Baer said he cited Trudeau's hot mic moment and said, is this serious? And Trump said, yes, it is, and then started going into why he wants Canada to become the 51st state. He talked about a trade imbalance. He's still claiming that, the Americans subsidizes to the tune of $200 billion. Well, one, the trade surplus isn't that big. Also, a trade surplus is not a subsidy. But, as I've been reading into the people around him and who are advising them, they do view the defense spending that they do and that we don't do as a subsidy. Trump was asked about this again on his flight to New Orleans for the Super Bowl and went on at length about how, Canada hasn't spent much on defense because they assumed that we would defend them. Well, they can't make that assumption anymore, and we're not going to spend that money, but if you're a state, then we'll defend you. But if not, you're going to pay. So essentially, that's part of his thinking on tariffs. His thinking on tariffs is muddled and all over the place. I thought we were getting a 30-day reprieve, but that's part of what's going on there. So, I think all of this started as a joke. I don't think it's a joke anymore. The bad part is I don't know where it goes from here, Jeanette.
Canada's fentanyl czar says he will work with his United States counterparts to improve Canada's efforts to detect and disrupt the trade of the drug. Former RCMP Deputy Commissioner Kevin Brasso was introduced to the public Wednesday at a border crossing in Lansdowne, Ontario. He says more details about what he'll be doing in his new position will be released in the coming days. The role of fentanyl czar was created in response to President Trump threatening to impose steep tariffs on all goods from Canada, citing the flow of illegal drugs.
I'm hoping to be able to give an intensity to the work being carried out by thousands of men and women in this country and the United States trying to deal with the real public safety and national security crisis that is fentanyl. bringing that integrated approach, bringing the teams together, ensuring the collaboration, ensuring the communication is happening at officials level on both sides of the border in communities across the country.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, meantime, speaking from Washington, says her team has already been in touch with the fentanyl czar and says it is a step in the right direction for Canada.
I think diplomacy is working. I think that the fact that we got a 30-day reprieve was because we agreed to work on the cross-border problem of fentanyl. I was pleased to see the federal government announced a fentanyl czar, and my administration has already been in touch with him to talk about how in Alberta we can lend to the success of those efforts. So what I would say is what I've seen from this president is that he is prepared to make a deal. We've made a deal on that. I think we can make a deal on steel and aluminum by making very much the same argument that I've been making on energy and critical minerals. We've won the argument that those raw materials are essential to American success. It comes in, it makes value-added products, it creates good American jobs, it creates good American products that we buy back. Same thing for aluminum. They just do not make enough for their defense industry, their auto industry, and their critical needs. So I think aluminum, we can make the very same argument, and on steel, we buy as much steel products from them as they buy from us.
And while our government officials are dealing with allegations, tariff threats, and border issues, there is still a leadership race underway. A new poll suggests that if Mark Carney wins the Liberal leadership race, he would erase the massive lead the Conservatives have been enjoying this past year and a half. Here's Kyle Duggan of the Canadian Press with more.
A new Leger poll paints a picture of how the frontrunners in the Liberal leadership race might fare leading their party against the federal Conservatives. If Mark Carney becomes the next Liberal leader, survey research suggests that the party would gain a 6-point bounce and erase the advantage held by the Conservative Party led by Pierre Poilievre. A Carney-led Liberal Party would garner 37% support, with the Tories also at 37% in a dead heat. But a Chrystia Freeland-led party would slide to 28% and leave the Conservatives in majority government territory. More Canadians also placed their trust in Carney with taking on U.S. President Donald Trump than did Freeland, at 20% to just 6%. Pollster Andrew Enns says this is a tough spot to be in for Freeland and an easy sales pitch for Carney's team. The poll reached more than 1,500 adults from February 7th to the 10th, but does not carry a margin of error since it's an online poll.
Meantime, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says he doesn't think he'll have to choose between voting on tariff relief or bringing down the government because he expects a snap election call if Mark Carney wins the Liberal leadership. Singh says if the government was serious about introducing a relief package for workers who might lose their jobs due to U.S. tariffs, it would have recalled Parliament by now. At a news conference in Vancouver Thursday, Carney would not rule out calling out a snap election if he becomes Liberal leader. According to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney plans to hide the carbon tax, even though he's campaigning to get rid of it. According to the CTF, he's using sneaky tactics to hit businesses with a hidden carbon tax and apply stipulations to how people spend it. To explain this in more detail is Chris Sims, the Alberta director for the CTF. She sat down with BCN's Jeanette Roche.
Chris, welcome. Thanks for joining me. Now, the CTF is claiming Mark Carney is planning to hide the carbon tax. How is he planning to do this exactly?
So, number one, with his announcement, he was very careful in his language. He said that he wants to get rid of the consumer carbon tax. And in particular, he said that the current carbon tax had suffered from a perception problem, meaning that all of us who are getting upset looking at our home heating bills saying, why is my carbon tax $60 a month or $40 a month, whatever it is, that was all just our misperception. It wasn't the fact that we were getting screwed by the carbon tax. That wasn't the problem. It was all misperception. So Carney himself has said that he wants to make big polluters pay and get rid of the front-facing consumer carbon tax. The issue here is that in his mind, a big polluter is a producer of natural gas, which we use to heat our homes. A big polluter is a fuel refinery that is creating gasoline and diesel at the pumps. Those companies will not eat the cost of the carbon tax and make it go away. Those costs will be passed down to you and me, So we will still be paying the consumer carbon tax. We just won't see it because he's hiding it.
And Chris, the CTF is also saying that Carney is making it so that people can't just get the cash back to pay bills or buy groceries. It has to be spent in certain ways. So what's the plan here?
As it stands right now, some people get some cash back on the current carbon tax. Carney has stated himself he will get rid of those cash rebates and replace it with a plan where you earn, for lack of a better term, green points or Carney points. Like, we don't know what they're called. You have to save up these green points, and then you can use those green points to purchase government-approved machines, like a heat pump or a solar scooter or a washer dryer or a furnace. The issue here is that even though it's not enough money and even though not everybody gets them, at least some folks were getting some of their money back, and it was cash, and they could choose what to do with it. But a lot of central planner types in government, of which Carney is one, they get upset with that kind of cashy freedom. And they then want to control what you're doing with those purchases. So he says that he's going to replace the cash rebates with this point system. How much it's going to cost or how long it'll take you to build up points, we don't know.
Thanks so much, Chris. That was Chris Sims, Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
Changing our focus over to provincial news now, the former head of Alberta Health Services is suing the provincial government, alleging wrongful dismissal and high-level government corruption surrounding medical contracts. A statement of claim alleges Athana Mentzelopoulos was fired last month for investigating overpriced contracts and conflicts of interest between government staff and companies being contracted. The lawsuit alleges Health Minister Adriana LaGrange tried to shut down the investigation and demanded Mentzelopoulos be fired. The allegations have not been proven in court, and LaGrange says many of them are false, while others need to be investigated. When asked when she became aware of concerns over contract negotiations at AHS, Premier Smith said if there is any wrongdoing found, they, quote, would like to get to the bottom of it.
Well, I'm glad that we're going to have the Auditor General take a look at it. I first became aware of it when I saw the newspaper reporting on it, and we're interested in hearing what the Auditor General has to say. We've already set up a shared file so that they can get all of the documents that we have to see if there is any wrongdoing. If there's wrongdoing, we'd like to get to the bottom of it. And if there isn't, we need to find out why AHS is standing in the way of charter surgical centres.
Former Mayor of Lethbridge, Chris Spearman, says he is releasing a letter to Premier Daniel Smith demanding clarity of the environmental effects of the proposed Grassy Mountain coal mining project. He says in the letter he's seeking clarification from statements made by Smith, Minister of Energy Brian Jean, and others based on logistical, legal, and business decisions in moving forward with the project. This comes as the Alberta Energy Regulator is allegedly days away from making a decision if Northback Holdings can move forward with metallurgical coal mining in the mountains near Crow's Nest Pass.
We've outlined 8 issues and asked for answers from the Premier on behalf of Albertans, and we want to share the answers with them. We have gone out and we have accessed the research reports from the government itself. We were surprised to find that the government's own reports actually agree with us that substantial contamination will happen with selenium and with coal-blown dust that will affect our river.
As the municipality of Crow's Nest Pass voted in favor of supporting the project, Chris Spearman said on Thursday that his petition signed by those opposed to have neared 5,000 signatures. 3 human traffickers have been arrested in what Alert, or Alberta's law enforcement response team, is calling Project Endgame. Take a look at this video out of Red Deer, Alberta.
Project Endgame was a human trafficking investigation that started in Edmonton, but it had spanned across Canada. And the targets of the Endgame have been involved in human trafficking across Canada for upwards of a decade. proactively targeted these individuals because we knew their involvement, and we knew that the violence that they bring to this type of crime across the country, and we knew that we had to do something to stop this from happening. Very significant charges that these three individuals are facing. The investigation showed us that these targets are very violent. They're willing to do almost anything to the victims to keep control of them, and preyed on their vulnerabilities and weaknesses. It's been over a year from start to finish, and we still aren't done yet. We still have a lot to do with the court process and with the victims in the future.
Over 400 education support workers west of Edmonton are expected to go on strike Tuesday after issuing a 72-hour strike notice on Friday. Members of QP Local 5543, which represents employees in the Parkland School Division, voted 91% in favor of issuing a strike notice to the school division. According to the union, a work-to-rule action will begin on February 18th, which means that members are asked to not work beyond the hours they are paid for and not participate in any volunteer activities at their jobs. Around 2,000 other school support workers within 4 other school divisions have taken strike votes, but have not served a notice to strike at the time of this recording. After the break, a story like something you would not hear anywhere else but on Unsolved Mysteries or Dateline. An American killer and fugitive lived for 50 years under a new name in a small southern Alberta town. More on that next. Welcome back. An American murderer wanted by authorities in the United States and Mexico had been living here in southern Alberta for nearly 50 years without being found by police. RBCN's Heidi Echeverria has this mysterious story.
Well, I just think everyone was totally surprised. Like, there was no indication whatsoever from, our interactions with who we knew as Deidre Glabus, actually, that she didn't have any criminal behavior here that we were aware of.
This was the shock reaction of those who knew Dee Glabus when they received the news that the kind and helpful woman was really Sharon Kinney, an American criminal and fugitive who killed 3 people in the United States and in Mexico between 1960 and 1964.
On September 18th, 1964, she shot and killed a man in a Mexico City hotel room and was arrested for the murder.
La Pistolera, which translates as the gunslinger, as she was known in Mexico for the 1964 murder of Francisco Ordóñez, had murdered her first husband, 25-year-old James Kinney, in March 1960, and 2 months later, she also killed Patricia Jones, her lover's wife.
Thanks to a courageous tip from a concerned individual, Sharon Kinney had been living under an assumed name in Alberta, Canada.
April 18th of 2024, we were contacted to inquire about if we had any knowledge about an individual residing in our community who they believed was here under a false name. As a result, we started our investigation. We ended up touching base at the end of the day with our local funeral home, found out that actually this individual that we were looking for was deceased 2 years previously, but the funeral home had actually taken a fingerprint. I was able to request the print, but unfortunately, due to our privacy laws, I wasn't able to get a copy of the print. I went through a bunch of legal means and asked a bunch of prosecutors whether or not I was going to be able to do this legally in Canada, and the answer was no. I decided to have a look at the company that actually stores the fingerprints. And when I did that, I contacted the investigator. They got an administrative subpoena legally in the United States and obtained the fingerprint image. And the FBI confirmed very quickly that actually the person that we had living in our community was Sharon Kine.
May 31st, 2024, exactly to the day, 64 years after her initial arrest, we were able to confirm with the FBI that the fingerprints obtained throughout our investigation were compared to the initial arrest fingerprints made in 1960 and confirmed that Deidre Glavis was indeed Sharon Kinney and had been living in Alberta, Canada.
I knew her for many, many years. She worked as a night clerk at the Heritage Inn and had many interactions with her. All the documents that she would have had in Canada, including her driver's license, social insurance number, were valid.
Sharon was a woman that never faced the consequences of her actions, leaving them for her children to deal with. She caused great harm without thought or remorse.
It's just too bad that the information came out 2 years after she passed away. It would have been nice to hear it earlier so that there could have been justice for the victims as well as some closure for some families.
According to investigations, Kinney moved to Taber, Alberta in 1973, seeking a quiet life while on the run from authorities. She married several times, worked as a real estate agent, and volunteered at the food bank baking banana bread. According to acquaintances from Taber Senior Center, Kinney loved to play bridge, a card game, every Thursday at 1:30 p.m. With her death at the age of 81, a story that seemed straight out of a horror movie with a double life full of secrets has come to the end. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echavarria.
One of the development companies for the proposed Lethbridge 2 and 3 solar facilities has said they are thrilled after the Alberta Utilities Commission approved the development of the combined solar field south. The two project owners, New E Power, along with Low Carbon Canada Limited, planned to build the combined project in private land just southwest of the Lethbridge Airport. The project aims to develop 157 megawatts of electricity and offset over 138,000 tons of carbon. The news comes after the Lethbridge 1 solar project recently went into commercial production on the 31st of January, which holds a power capacity of 9 megawatts. The project is expected to begin construction this year and begin operation in 2027. So, what are the greatest needs by a man and a woman in a relationship? Is it companionship, security? How about intimacy? Marriage coach Brent Taylor has some thoughts on the subject, and he shares them with BCN's Jeanette Roche in just a moment. And if you're watching us online, that full interview is available on our YouTube channel.